It has long been alleged that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Not this one, of course. This one is garbage, as is the person in it.
But thankfully, most photos aren't as wretched as this. They're actually quite popular. When was the last time you saw a friend or relative without them thrusting upon you, quite unsolicited, several hundred snaps of that morning's breakfast, or last night's breakfast, or the small breakfasts they shared with a neighbour on their way to the cafe for breakfast? Lucrative it must be then to be a purveyor of pictures, an illustrator of images, a manufacturer of images, a photographer. But what is photography? Well, let's do a think. Onion gravy, ba 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 da. Onion gravy, ba ba ba. Oh, hello. Didn't see you there. I was just singing about onion gravy. Photography. It's a word we hear thrown around a lot these days, from the local picture smith peddling their disgusting wares outside of the charity shop, to the big budget photo engines that roam our streets, capturing the likenesses of everything they see for display in the haunted archives. But for all that we understand about photography, for instance, that it exists, there are dozens of aspects that we don't understand, like why hasn't it evolved legs yet if it's so smart? So let's find out about photography, or facsimile theft production, as nobody calls it. What is it? How does it work? If it does work, how does it play? Using soft toys and electronic function generators, preposterous and hateful as a notion. To find out, let's begin by looking at photography's estranged cousin who never shows up to family functions. Vision.
Light, such as that generated by this torch crammed inside a sock in a freezer bag, bounces off an object such as these oranges with faces drawn on them, and then enters oculus pelvis, or the eye, represented here by a mug full of knives.
Inside the eye, it hits a structure known as the Fort Boyard, which contains cells, puzzles, and physical challenges based on personal phobias that generate electrical signals, much like those by which this common household stationery plate powers this Nintendo 3DS.
When the human brain receives these signals, it pulls some bloody nonsense or other that I can't be bothered to learn about, and then we call it vision.
Based on these insights, we have narrowed down the question of how photography works to 3 options.
1. It works in exactly the same way as vision. 2. It has limited similarity to vision. 3. It is nothing like vision at all.
Nice work, eggheads. You had one job. Perhaps a good first step to further narrowing down these options is to look at the origins of photography, which, as every schoolchild knows, takes us back to the raging, tumultuous waters of the Irish Sea.
The first camera in recorded history was possessed by the fearsome Irish pirate queen Grace O'Malley, who used it to record her criminal exploits in case she might ever need to arrest herself and provide evidence. So elusive was she as a fugitive that the only reason we know what we do about Captain O'Malley is the extensive photographic diary she kept of her life, detailing her many seaborne atrocities and decadent lunches at local cafes. It even covers events before the discovery of the camera itself. Such was the extent of her skill with the device.
There has never been any evidence to indicate that Grace O'Malley made the camera herself, but it was long assumed to be the case because nobody had the time or inclination to look into it properly. But, as recently as the other day, a page from what is assumed to be her journal was found behind a packet of chocolate biscuits in a cupboard of the Let's Do a Think offices, and it was finally read, stating,
June the 1st, whatever year Grace O'Malley was alive. Magical box appeared in my hands as I ran a man through during some real top-dollar piracy. Seems to create images of whatever I point it at, having a grand old time with it.
In the words of Dr. Sylvia Paper, a prominent photologist from the University of Wickford, who asked in a polite but not legally binding way not to be named, "Get out of my office." When pushed for a more relevant comment, she said that scientists have no chuffing idea how cameras are made today, let alone how it would have been achieved historically. Based on what we here at Let's Do a Think know about the first camera, and supported by the claims in Grace's journal, we speculatively put it down to spontaneous creation, a process by which the universe simply wills something into existence. This may be familiar to some of you already, since it's been long established as the origin of towels. In this case, as a result of consistent feats of impressiveness that needed to be recorded, the first camera simply popped into existence so that the actions of Grace O'Malley would not be forgotten. The strength of this spontaneous creation effect is of course measured on the O'Malley-ometer, which was named for entirely unrelated reasons. This groundbreaking, totally real and 100% legitimate discovery piqued the interest of the historical community at large. Unfortunately, the last known location of Grace O'Malley and her trademark photographic camera were aboard her doomed ship, the Citation Needed.
Its final voyage set sail from Dublin International Boat Airport, or port for short, with a view to raiding British trading vessels on their way to the Americas. It's not known what goods or how much gold they sought to intercept, but the general consensus is that they would have worn warm socks to keep out the chill.
Disaster, however, was to strike on this fateful voyage. Despite Grace's expert captaincy, she was caught in a violent storm which had been hiding behind Mount Snowdon.
Creeping up to take them unawares, the storm tossed the Citation Needed around like a wet bag of old grass clippings, sending it hard into the rocky outcroppings that probably lurk somewhere in the water around there. The crew is baselessly speculated to have held on for a long time, employing the techniques of the emergency shipwright, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, and even the Druid in their attempts to keep the vessel seaworthy, but ultimately it was for naught. The damage, as they say and I am now also saying, had already been done to the Citation Needed.
Its hull scuttled, the ship was lost, along with all 40 souls aboard, including, most tragically of all, the first camera. The sad tale of Captain O'Malley's demise is not just of interest to photologists, however. It also forms the subject of prominent folk singer Spaniel Daniel's most famous song, A Captain Till the End.
Captain O'Malley lived life on the sea, indulging her love of photography, with hair like a campfire and a smile like a hog, in Davy Jones' lockers where she popped her clogs.
How horrible. The Citation Needed and her spectral crew lay at the bottom of the sea for what historians generally term like ages, mate, until, after some impressive archaeological efforts, the ship was salvaged and the camera subsequently retrieved by eminent historian, diver, and post office queue jumper, Professor Ernest Mistake. Disaster, however, was to strike Professor Ernest Mistake on this fateful voyage. On the way back to his laboratory, he was caught in a violent storm, which had been hiding just behind Sainsbury's local. His hull scuttled, he was lost, along with the 3 souls who happened to be nearby, as well as a freshly baked cheese and onion pasty. 5 more tragic hull scuttlings later, we finally managed to get the first camera back to the Let's Do a Think labs for some serious study. Although the film was heavily damaged by years at sea and then 20 minutes in the microwave, some lessons were learned from examination of the camera itself. Confirming what we already suspected, a photograph is a torn-off piece of the subject's soul, locked into the image eternally and probably in significant torment. Not contented with allowing the final records of Grace O'Malley to be lost, the Let's Do a Think Historical Society, pictured here preparing to embezzle money from a young man they met at the supermarket, used techniques of reconstruction, simulation, second-hand hearsay from a local off-license, and dreams to recreate what might maybe have been on that camera potentially, but we don't know.
Here's a coastline around which she may have sailed, and drowned many an unwilling rudder repair specialist. Maybe this stone that she might have feasibly wanted to photograph was special as a romantic suitor, and perhaps she would have kicked the ever-loving out of this flower.
We can't say for sure, mostly for legal reasons. But with the knowledge that these souls are locked away in agony forever, we have a happy ending to Grace's story after all. So where does that leave us with photography today? Well, nowadays there are over 7 cameras in the world, with each one suspected of being capable of harvesting hundreds of thousands of souls per day. They're in your home, in your phone, your laptop, your webcam, and yes, probably even in your carpet. We don't mind, however, because telescopic soul filters, blinding flashes, and the heavy use of liquid granite have rendered the process over 30% safe for humans. It is still fatal for bowls.
Today's digital cameras imprison pockets of time in tiny cells to form images over and over for eternity, hence the term capture a moment. These so-called photo-incarceration cells, or pixels, are among the cruelest and least ethical constructs known to humankind, shortly behind pay toilets.
We're willing to overlook that, however, because they're pretty handy. So handy, in fact, that they are now the #1 method of storing information in this cruel modern age. The Let's Do a Think Historical Society, pictured here in happier times, having just eaten my neighbour's dog, believe that photography rose to prominence over more traditional methods of storing information, like brass rubbings, sometime last Thursday, possibly in the 2 o'clock lull just after lunch, when nobody could really be bothered to get the crayons out. So what have we learned today, just by doing a think about photography? Well, we know it is undoubtedly the product of lawlessness at sea, that it has the potential to cause suffering to millions of souls, and we wouldn't change it for the world. Thank you, photography. May your cruelty find ever greater heights in future.
Cheers!